So in the news this week, there was a really interesting story, and maybe you have been following it like me, but Danelo Cavalcante escaped from prison around 12 days ago and was recaptured only yesterday. But it was a really interesting story, and I want to sort of unpack it a little bit. So in the news this week, we're going to talk about his escape, not so much on his capture. I want to start by playing the video. You might not have seen the video of it before, but I think they called it like a crab climb up the wall. So we'll play the video, then I'll come back and discuss it. So let's drop that in there.
Moment escapes through the roof of a Pennsylvania prison's exercise yard. There you see Danelo Cavalcante placing his hands and feet on the walls and shimmy right on up. CNN reports it's the same way another inmate briefly broke out of the Chester County prison in May. According to the warden, Cavalcante then pushed through razor wire, ran across a roof, and scaled a fence to escape. Authorities have been searching for the 34-year-old for a week now. Last spotted Tuesday entering the woods on the east of the side of the growing search area.
Okay, so sorry for the fact that it kicked me out of my own live. I've never had that before, but we saw the video there of Danelo was doing like the crab walk to get up the side of the building to escape. And what was interesting to me is it reminded me of the routine activities theory and a little bit about crime prevention through design. So the routine activities theory in 1979, two criminologists, Marcus Felsen and Lawrence Cohen, they looked at their hypothesis as to why does crime occur. And they really settled on three things, that crime isn't about economic or social status or ethnicity or race. It is really about opportunity. Opportunity causes crime. So if we look at how he crab-tailed up how he crab-walked or climbed up the building, so to speak, he had the opportunity. In the routine activities theory, he was a motivated offender. He was someone that was incarcerated for murder, serving his sentence. So he was motivated to escape, not to spend his entire life in prison. He had the suitable or soft target that Cohen and Felsen talk about, that there was a design fault there within the building which allowed him, I don't know how tall he was, but allowed a person who wasn't very tall to walk between the two walls and then climb up between them. When it was built, that type of philosophy or thought process most probably wasn't even in existence. I forget the name of it, but there is a sort of a hobby now, or an activity, whatever you choose to call it, where people like jump off these high-rise buildings and they'll do all these crazy stunts and stuff. I know there's a certain name for it. It's appeared in many movies. So no one was even thinking someone was going to do that back in a time when this jail prison was built, I'm sure. And then the last thing that he had was the absence of a capable guardianship. So we saw in the video, you can see in the bottom right corner, one of his friends there was keeping watch. And we're going to talk about the person that was on guard duty, watching the work area or the activities area, for like what happened to that person. So it reminded me of the routine activities theory, where you need a motivated offender. He was a convicted murderer, motivated to escape, a suitable or soft target. He had the opportunity to escape because there was a design fault in the building, and there was the absence of capable guardianship. The guard that should have been watching that rest area was distracted. I'm going to talk about that in a few moments. The interesting thing about this was there's so much learning for us in the corporate world, or in a school, or in a house of worship, or nonprofit, wherever you are, because CNN reports that another inmate had actually escaped in the same way in May. Now we are June, July, August, just into September. 4 months ago, someone did the same or similar thing. So we have to ask ourselves, why was that not corrected? And here's the reason why it ties into schools, nonprofits, and organizations that I work with, is that when we go through emergency preparedness, when we find gaps in our programs, in our safety and security, in our risk management, when we find a gap, It's crucial that we do an after-action review, yes, because we understand what is the root cause analysis, what is actually allowing this prisoner to escape, where it was the design fault in the building. When we go through our root cause analysis post an incident, what we have to then do, and this is the biggest obstacle that I find that a lot of organizations struggle with, what we have to then do is correct what we see, and we have to follow through. I said this to my 12-year-old son only 2 weeks ago, saying, Maxwell, you don't have to be the best at everything that you do, but you need to finish the race. You need to follow through. So what was interesting to me when CNN reported that another inmate had escaped in May, I had so many questions. Well, was there an after-action review? There has to have been an after-action review. What did that meeting decide? What did they determine was the root cause analysis? And then who took ownership of that problem, of that vulnerability to correct it? It's what I see in a lot of organizations that post the meeting, it tends to drift, it tends to fade, and we come back 5, 6, 7 months later, and that issue has not been corrected. Only in May, only a few months before this prisoner escaped for 12 days, did someone else do this. And then us as a taxpayer, we're having to pay for the search and rescue. We're having to pay for the search. All of the resources are being taken away for more important things than someone else making a mistake of not following through on an after-action review. So if you're an organization that has an emergency plan and you're testing it, you find vulnerabilities, have your after-action review, but it's incredibly important that you do what you say you're going to do. You create that project plan, you follow through, and you find a pathway to remove or start to manage and mitigate that vulnerability. Not all vulnerabilities and risk can be mitigated. Some can only be managed, but it's important that you create that plan and follow through. Now, the last thing I want to talk about in relation to this, I mentioned about, and I'm getting confused in my mind, is it like a rest area, a work area, wherever these prisoners go to have their outside exercise? The guard on the watchtower had his personal cell with him, and I think within 1 or 2 days, he was fired. So within 1 or 2 days of this incident, he had his phone on him. So can I safely assume, can you trust me on this, that he had his personal cell phone on him and that he was fired 1 or 2 days later? Can we all agree that he was clearly distracted and was on his phone? And again, a lot of people would call this red teaming. This is just a process where you will test your policies and your procedures. So if you have a person who is on guard duty, who is watching, the names just come to me now, the exercise yard. If you have someone who is watching the exercise yard per your procedure, no personal cell phones, this is what your responsibility is. A lot of people would call this red teaming. Are we confirming that our staff are doing what is expected of them? Are we making sure that all our policies and procedures are being followed? And again, as I said earlier, when we find gaps, are we taking the time to discuss those gaps, find the root cause analysis, and then rectify those? The root cause analysis for this one could be you've got one guy in a guard shack who's up on the roof somewhere looking down. He's in there on his own. He's maybe up there for 30, 45 minutes, an hour. I know from when I used to do surveillance in England, being on your own in an observation post for an extended period of time is actually quite challenging because you've got to maintain a lot of concentration. Was anyone with him? Should he have been having more breaks so he's refreshed and then can watch? So you would learn this by testing your process. And like I said, a lot of organizations call this red teaming, but if you have policies and procedures, you've got to follow through. You've got to make sure that your people are doing what is expected of them. And it's very clear to me that the guard having his personal cell phone with him and being fired 2 days later, the inference is that he was on his cell phone, he was distracted, he was not doing what he was supposed to be doing. So shame on him, yes, because he's been employed to do a job and he's not doing it properly, but also a little bit shame on the prison department because they should have been reviewing how long these people are alone for. They should have been reviewing the procedures to know if they're being tested, and they also need to take some accountability in this as well. So I just found that entire case study really interesting to me as to how he managed to escape by crab crawling up the wall, how the guard was distracted on their cell phone, and most importantly, the fact that the organization had someone escape or try to escape like that only a few months prior. So where was the after action review? So I think when we look at it in our own environments, there's a lot of learning that we can take from this surrounding, do we have set processes? Are we reviewing them to make sure they work? Are we doing the right training? And do we understand enough about our environment? That prison was undoubtedly built in a generation when no one thought that a prisoner one is going to try to escape, or they're going to try and shimmy up that wall. There's another term for that, crime prevention through environmental design. I'm sure if someone had looked at that and said, actually, you're susceptible for someone to try to climb on the roof because the walls are too close, that allows a person to climb up in that way. So it's about constantly reviewing our safety and security, our risk management strategies, just trying to get 1% better than the day before. We can never strive for perfection because perfection doesn't exist, but we can strive for excellence. And the excellence comes from being self-aware, taking action, following through on our plan. So I found that to be a really interesting story for in the news of this week. I would love to hear your views. Have you been following the story? Did anything strike you as significant in the story? Please comment below. Would love to hear your views. And if there's anything that my organization, Kingswood Security, can do to help you with your risk management or your vulnerabilities, please feel free to reach out for me. But for now, you have a great day and I'll see you next time. Take care.